My name is Nancy Ungerman, and I'll be interviewing Zeck Lieberman today. Today is the 13th of February, and the videographer is Ruth Andrews. We were talking before. Tell me a little bit about your childhood, where you were born.
It was a great childhood. Born in Floresville, Texas. I'm the youngest of 4 children. My father originally had a grocery store, but basically had a dry goods store in the town. And the town's right about 30 miles from San Antonio. Population about 1,500 people.
I love it.
And I think you asked before, were there many Jewish families? There was one Jewish family we were very close to. The town was just very, very friendly to us. We had a great childhood because of the small town. It was easy to get around. You could walk to school, walk to the movies, walk to downtown.
There was a movie house?
There was a theater. I think I just told you, my brother just turned 85, and he, for his birthday, he wanted to come down to San Antonio to visit my sister and us and all of us. And his son-in-law and daughter and 2 of their children came with him. They had never been to Floresville. He's from New York, and she's from St. Louis, so they'd never been to a small town in Texas. And neither had Maryland actually been to Floresville. So we got a bus, and all of us went down there, had an unbelievable day. As you turned off the highway, which is where Walmart pulled everybody out, went down on the roads were no longer dirt, but this movie Arcadia Theater was still there, and the courthouse was still there. And we ended up actually going to a railroad station that was no longer there, but it had a water tower and a sign. And as we got there, a gentleman came up and said he's from Houston. He's an amateur photographer, and he took pictures for maybe 30 minutes or an hour. Sent us they just made an album of the pictures. It's just unbelievable. So we had a great time. Floresville's now maybe 2,500 people. It hadn't really changed much. But it was a great place.
With any people that?
We didn't see anybody, we didn't really see anybody there. We just drove in that one day and had a lot of fun and showing around and reminiscing. It was a great place to grow up. Competition amongst people was zero. Education was excellent. At that time, education all over about the same. But then we moved to San Antonio when I was about 6 or 7 years old. Went to school there, and being from a small town was a benefit to me. It always has been. Delightful place to grow up.
What is the date of your birth?
June 7th, 1928.
In San Antonio, you stayed until what age?
Until I went to University of Texas between age 15, between 15 or 16, went to University of Texas. In those days, all you had to do was to get on a bus, go to Austin, go to a big table, look up L, and see if they had their transcript from high school, and if they did, $25, and you got into University of Texas. 5,000 students at Texas. So it was very easy to get into University of Texas. It was a great educational experience. So it made education very, very pleasant.
Were there fraternities in those days?
Phi Sigma Delta. I was in Phi Sigma Delta fraternity.
Your neighborhood growing up in San Antonio, what was that like?
Same. It was just a local neighborhood, and very friendly. And we could go to junior high school. We could walk. We went to high school, Thomas Jefferson. We would take a bus, or somebody had a car to drive us. But mother didn't have to nobody had to carpool in those days. And all of the activity was very easy. And both my mother and my father worked, so they went about their business, and there were 4 of us, and it was just a very pleasant childhood.
Are you the youngest?
I'm the youngest.
I just want to backstep for a minute.
Sure.
The town, Pleasant, what was the name of your town?
Floresville.
Yeah, Forest.
John Connolly was born in Floresville. That's the claim to fame was John Connolly. Then he moved to Fort
I
Worth.
was going to say, did your family know his family, or?
Very much so. My mother, when he was in Parkland Hospital, she called, wanted me to go by and see John. Well, you couldn't get into Parkland Hospital after that at the time, but so I didn't really know him personally because he had already moved.
Did you have any Jewish education, or were you conscious of being Jewish?
Oh, very much so. My folks were very involved with the temple in San Antonio, and every Sunday we would drive to San Antonio, which is a little over 30 miles, Sunday school, come back. My folks were both very active in temple. My mother was the president of Sisterhood, and we were friendly with the rabbis and all the people there. So, yeah, we were bar mitzvahed in those days. Not many boys got bar mitzvahed, but we all did. My two brothers and I. So yeah, we were exposed. Dr. Frisch, Rabbi Frisch, was a rabbi and very good friend of my family. So we were brought up, very easy, reformed Jewish environment.
Goes way back. I would think that would be unusual for a small town.
Well, you either had some contact, being 30 miles away, but the effort was made by my family, and it was something we look forward to.
Your family background, give me a little bit of information about where your parents, grandparents were born, how they got to Texas.
That's very interesting for both ways. My father was born in between Russia and Poland, in that area. And in those days, if you were the oldest son, you could stay with your family. If you were any other son, at the age of 14, you'd be conscripted into the Russian army, never to be seen again. So my dad came over from Russia, or Poland area, by himself at the age of 14. He had saved up enough money to make the trip by himself, went to Philadelphia where we had relatives. He stayed there for a while and then went down to Texas, joined the Army, and then settled in Floresville. He was in Floresville before, set up a grocery store and then a dry goods store. But he was a very humble guy and just thought the United States was a haven. And in those days, when you would make a little bit of money, you wouldn't do much on your own. You'd just bring another family member over from the country. So we always had relatives staying at our house. They would come into the United States and come down to San Antonio, to Floresville.
I'm curious, it was in the back of my mind, how did a 14-year-old save enough money to make the voyage?
I have no idea. I mean, there was those days when it didn't take a lot of money. It just took a lot of ingenuity and confidence that you wanted to get into an area that you could grow up. My mother, on the other hand, was born in New York, and her parents died very young, and she had a older sister and a younger brother, but she was sort of the mother of both their sister and her brother. And so she grew up in New York and went down to Yorktown, which is a small town near Floresville, to visit her sister. And that's when my father met her when she came down from New York. She stayed and moved from New York City to Floresville.
How was her adjustment?
It was the town and her got along just unbelievable. She loved it down there, raised us, worked all the time with my father in the dry goods business. And so it was just a very pleasant experience. Both my parents were very self-sustaining and very family-oriented.
What is your mother's background as far as were the grandparents born?
Well, I really don't know a lot about it because her father died very young, and her mother died soon after childbirth with her brother. So I really don't know a lot about my grandparents. Never really met any of my grandparents, only through the influence of my parents.
Well, so you still have relatives in New York.
Not really very many. A lot of some in New York. It was quite a while ago. My father stayed in Philadelphia for a while, but we really haven't kept up with too many of the relatives up in New York at all. The family actually moved down to Texas. My mother's brother moved in with us, and then he moved into Laredo and other places to do a business. So a lot of people sort of passed through. And in South Texas, we populated Lockhart, Seguin, and all the small towns.
That's the only one I've heard of, Seguin.
It's a good town.
Yeah.
Robstown.
Yeah. That was probably a booming town for you.
Well,
It was
yes.
3,000 or 4,000.
A lot of small towns down there.
It sounds like you never met with anti-Semitism at all.
Unbelievably so. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because I went to University of Texas. It was extremely friendly. I then went to medical school, and at that time, the idea was that there weren't many people who went into surgery who were Jewish. There was thought to be an potential anti-Semitic feeling as far as surgeons were concerned. Never touched me at all. It was if anything, an advantage to being Jewish, I've always felt. Then when I came to Dallas, I went to Baylor Hospital, which is a Baptist hospital, and they welcomed me with open arms, and it's still extremely friendly environment. So I've always heard about anti-Semitism. I've just never been exposed to a day of it in my life.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, it is wonderful.
So after college, you went straight into med school?
Went right into medical school. In those days, it was, you didn't have a degree. I actually went to college for 2 years, and then summers on both sides, and then got into Tulane Medical School without a degree. I've still never had a college degree, but you were allowed to do that. I was just, when I graduated medical school, just turning 21, because it was a sort of a rapid move in and out of college in medical school.
So you, going to Baylor, you just automatically came to, Tulane.
I went to Tulane.
Okay. Yeah,
I went to Tulane Medical School.
Yeah. So what got you to Dallas?
That's a long story. I went from Tulane, I went to St. Louis, Barnes Hospital, and had my surgical training there. And then what I wanted to do, the opportunity was the Korean War was on, and so I volunteered to go in the Army, to go to a MASH hospital, because all of my surgical friends were over there, and the MASH hospitals were just being developed in the front lines, and the surgeons really had great experience. So I really wanted to do that. So I went to Washington and volunteered to the Army, went down to San Antonio, and a day or two before I was leaving, Eisenhower went over and they signed an armistice. And so there I was getting ready to go to Korea in peacetime, and it would not be a very interesting job. So they
As luck would have it.
As luck would have it, that's right, because there was 500 of us there. And they said, the Navy came in and the Air Force came in and said, look, we'll take people who want to come in if you qualify for us. Long story short, I got transferred to the Air Force, went to Shepherd Field in Wichita Falls, which was a great experience, and then had a wedding. It was a wedding in Wichita Falls, and I went to the wedding, and Marilyn came from Dallas and went to the wedding, and that's how we met.
Marilyn was born and raised
Marilyn
in
was
Dallas.
born in Dallas and went down into the wedding, and I was in the wedding party, and we met, and
That was it.
that was it, that's right.
How old?
When I was 26 at the time, 27.
An older man those
Well,
days.
yeah, relatively speaking.
what did you do for fun growing up in San Antonio and also where you were born?
Just living in the area with my good friends and my brothers and sisters, and didn't really play. In those days, there wasn't a lot of sports in the direction they are right now. It was just local and neighborhood sporting activities. So just mainly the normal activities. Summer, I'd go to Robstown where my cousins lived and spend the summer in Robstown. So it was just a very easy childhood.
And on Friday night or Sunday night, you drive into San Antonio?
Sunday morning.
Sunday morning.
It was
so
only
Sunday. So you had a Sunday school education from
Sunday school, right?
Your career is medicine. Tell me a little bit about what you do, or when we were talking before, what you did.
Well, what was amazing, because it's so different now when you try to go to medical school. I was real young and didn't really know what I wanted to do. My brother always wanted to be a doctor. I never really thought about it. I was going to business with my father and my brother, my older brother. But then I was young and thought, well, I'll go ahead and get more education. So I applied to Tulane. And they had always on the application, why do you want to be a doctor? And I said, well, I'm not even sure I want to be a doctor. But I thought it would be interesting to look into. And now if you said that, they wouldn't even look at your application. So once I was there, I actually, between my junior and senior year, I liked all the courses and was going to be an internist, actually, but had an opportunity to go to Mass General Hospital in the summer to take a senior surgery course, not for credit, in surgery, just to learn a little bit more about surgery. And I went up to Boston and had a tremendous experience. And from that day on, I found out I loved everything about the surgical profession. Yeah.
And you mainly, I think, work on malignancy.
Well, when I came down to general surgery with emphasis on malignancy.
Well, I know I used you. You did a wonderful job.
Well, I enjoyed taking care of you and everybody else.
We have covered lots of things here. Who are your role models?
Oh, I would say my father, number one, my brothers, several of my uncles, everybody led such a good life that it was something to model myself after. In medicine, Dr. Oxner was an unbelievable role model, a very generous person. He felt it was more important to teach medical students than residents. That's an unusual thing for a surgical chief. And then Dr. Carl Moyer, the chief of surgery, he was the original chief of surgery at Southwestern Medical School. But then he came to Barnes Hospital when I was there. And then in Dallas, certainly people like Dr. Sparkman, Bob Sparkman, and Dr. Duckett were excellent surgeons, and they just were so kind to me to help me get started, and Billy Aronoff. So I've people in front of me that's really helped me all through life, really.
Do you have children, grandchildren? I know you do. Tell me a little bit about each one, their names and their ages.
I have 3 children, and all are pleasantly, happily married, and 9 grandchildren. Steve is 51 and loves the real estate business, and very active in the community in all aspects. And first he went in with Herb Weitzman, and then has opened his own company, the Retail Connection, that is really doing extremely well.
I see his name all over the
Everybody
city.
likes to work with Steve. He likes to work with everybody else, and he has done a lot in the community with cystic fibrosis and other other type of things.
And your other two
He
children?
married Lisa, and unbelievable person, and has two boys, 17 and 16, and they're just thinking now about getting ready to go to college when the time comes.
16 and 17.
Right.
Is that what you? So they're 13 months apart.
About a year and a half apart of that.
Mhm.
Very close, very nice boys. And then Susan had married, and
You must brag about this for a minute. Who did she marry?
well, she married Michael Dell, who's certainly been a marvelous person for the country and the community,
Mhm.
as well as Susan. She's become very interested in philanthropy. She's interested in all health factors of exercise and diet, and they're mainly interested in raising their children.
Mhm.
And they've got 4 children, and their oldest is I think about 20, and then another daughter, and then they have twins, and they're all again very active. The daughter is in college right now. Took a year off between high school and college, and her other daughter is graduating this year, and then the 2 twins are still, of course, in high school.
Guy
And then
twins or gal?
Boy-girl twins.
Boy-girl
Right.
twins.
And then my son Randy live in town. He's got 3 kids, daughter and 2 younger sons. And the daughter's like 10 and 6, I think, 7 and 4. And they're all, everybody's active and growing.
So, you actually lived here for 50 years.
We came in 1957.
Oh, so 60 years.
55.
Yeah. Mhm.
It'll be 55 years.
Do you have the same friends that you had when you
Unbelievable.
first moved here?
Unbelievably so, yeah. We very fortunate. I've had a lot of them in Austin and Texas, and Maryland, of course, grew up here. But the friends that we have stayed very close as we've grown up, and are still very friendly.
Who are some of them? It's always fun to have that on record.
Buddy Rosenthal, Dick Rosenthal, Eddie Daniels, Richard Rosenberg. They're friends that we've been friendly with. Max Tonkin we're with over the weekends, and Alan Kane and I actually come here and exercise at the JCC every Sunday. So we've got a very close-knit group of friends.
Do you exercise on a schedule? Do you exercise more than once a week?
I love to exercise. Yeah, that's at least 3 times a week, whenever it's easy to do. And I've always felt that was very important to me, and luckily been able to do it.
Obviously, you look great.
We organized an exercise group a couple of years ago, Buddy Rosenthal, Rita, and Marilyn and I, and I thought, well, we ought to meet every Monday at 5 o'clock and exercise. And so I overdid the conversation that week, and thought, when I went home, I thought, I probably overdid it. Nobody's going to show up. Well, we showed up, about 4 or 5 couples. And so I have these ideas of health and exercise, and I thought this is going to be great. Well, we've met since then for the last several years on Monday.
Here,
We don't,
here. at the
well, it started out to start here and then go somewhere locally to eat. Now we all usually eat, and the exercise is sort of intermittent.
Sometimes you exercise.
That's right. So the
You
idea,
eat around the corner at
the idea is Cindy's or wherever, and it's a fun way to do things. And everybody talks about exercise and doing it sort of on their own, but the congregation doesn't really come over here the way it was planned.
Tell me about, I missed this, about your Jewish involvement in our community. Where do you go to temple?
Temple Emmanuel, and Rabbi Odom was extremely influential to Maryland in growing up, and extremely kind to me. I had a very nice relationship with Rabbi Odom. Jerry Klein, also talking about people that you like to model yourself about. He's such a compassionate man, and it was great, I thought, all the way through. And then David Stern, we've just been very lucky, I think, at the temple with the rabbi leadership, and David's just doing a great job. We had an opportunity to meet his father, and Marilyn and I have had the opportunity when he was alive to take him to go out to dinner when he'd come in town frequently. And what a unique human being he was, and David's just followed in his footsteps.
I agree. Were you interested in any committees or Jewish?
Interested, but then my medical practice has sort of occupied most of my activities. So I've been interested, but not really been an active participant like I'd like to have been.
Marilyn, I know she's been involved.
She was early on. I think in the last couple of years hadn't been as active as she'd like.
Is there anything you'd like to add that I've missed in this
No, I think
interview?
you've covered mostly. I think Dallas has been extremely good to Marilyn and I, and to my kids, grandchildren, and it's been an extremely friendly town for us to live and raise our families. So we're delighted to be in Dallas.
Well, thank you so much. You're a great addition
Well,
to
thank you. I enjoyed talking to you.
our
Thank you.
project.